I'm doing something new here at The Gamer, and instead of covering the latest AAA release, I'm gonna look at the 5 games you should buy instead of the next Assassin's Creed Valhalla. As I go through each title, I'll display a running tally of the combined cost of the games I recommend. Every year, AAA video game releases are guaranteed, but every year people sleep on amazing games that don't have as big a marketing budget. Today, we're gonna take a look at 5 awesome indie games you should buy for the price of Assassin's Creed Valhalla instead of Assassin's Creed Valhalla, because these games can scratch the same itch for less. I'll also compare the total average playtime of my recommended games with the average playtime of an Assassin's Creed game. And spoiler alert, these games are a better value. Our first game is Team Cherry's epic 2D action-adventure masterpiece, Hollow Knight, which first released in 2017 and today will run you $14.99. If what appealed to you in Assassin's Creed Valhalla was a crunchy, action-packed combat system spread across a huge world you could adventure through and explore, Hollow Knight could very well be the game for you. Scrolling by Steam's user-defined tags for Hollow Knight, you'll see it's a sort of genre hybrid, with some calling it a Metroidvania, some a platformer, and even some a Souls-like. Dark Souls is the Dark Souls of Dark Souls comparisons on the internet, so we won't be mentioning that famous FromSoft game again. Either way, Hollow Knight does do it all. The game has the tight controls and slick 2D level design of the best Metroidvanias, the physicality and depth of exploration and navigation of platformers, and even the open-ended, shortcut-happy level layouts of other popular tough-as-nails action RPGs. As far as what Assassin's Creed games are best known for, that's their stylish presentation that once included robust virtual recreations of massive historical cities, and now has ballooned into jaw-droppingly immense recreations of entire regions of the world. Hollow Knight isn't as massively ambitious, but its world is huge and exquisitely detailed in gorgeous, evocative pixel art and painted landscapes mixed together with tons of varied and interesting visual effects. Plus, if the repetition of modern Assassin's Creed games grinds your gears, Hollow Knight fills its beautiful world with over 130 enemies and 30 bosses. So there's always enough enemy variety to keep things feeling fresh. Tying the whole aesthetic of Hollow Knight together is its absolutely haunting, intimate score that helps to make the 2D world of the game truly come alive. In Assassin's Creed Valhalla, Ubisoft has taken steps to make their open world feel more dynamic, and as if it's filled with interesting people living their own unique lives. But Hollow Knight did this first and did this exceptionally well. And like any modern action game, Hollow Knight takes a bunch of cues from role-playing games, letting gamers upgrade skills and abilities and equip powerful items that can radically change how you play the game. To top it all off, Hollow Knight's main quest will last you an average of 25 hours. But if you dive into the side content, which you'll want to, that's another 13 hours on average. And to totally complete the game, that takes gamers on average a massive 54 hours. As a package, Hollow Knight is alone tough to beat. Whether you want an engaging world or just a tight combat system with a high skill ceiling and low barrier to entry, or a thrilling adventure through a strange place, Hollow Knight does it all for a fraction of the price of Assassin's Creed Valhalla. Really, if you haven't checked it out yet, you're playing yourself instead of an epic game that's not worth missing. Welcome to the second game you should buy instead of Assassin's Creed Valhalla, Undertale, Toby Fox's 2D pixel art RPG that swept the gaming world by storm back in 2015, and today goes for $9.99. For the folks at home, this brings my tally to $24.99. If you didn't know, Assassin's Creed is an RPG now. Sort of. The third-person action-adventure king of gaming is dead. Long live the new third-person action-adventure RPG light king of gaming. Ultimately though, if an RPG with a strong narrative and a cast of likable characters is what you're after, the Assassin's Creed games have never truly delivered that. But Undertale has, and continues to do so. How? And what is Undertale actually about? It's impossible to explain without spoiling the game's invented cleverness, but strange, quirky side content is usually what RPGs are best known for. Outside of the Bloody Baron fan favorite, Witcher 3 quests are usually side content that's completely skippable. Assassin's Creed Valhalla, which takes more than a little inspiration from The Witcher, is trying to do this too. Now, imagine an RPG that's all delicious, memorable side content. That's Undertale. None of it is essential to understand or appreciate some overcomplicated and overwritten plot. It's a fundamentally silly game embedded in internet culture, but its wackiness is its greatest strength. Years on, even people who don't like the game will admit there really isn't anything like it out there. All of Undertale's side quests and characters and places to explore and people to meet are extended bits. But even if you aren't looking for anything more than absurdity, the game still manages to tell a story brimming with heart and genuine emotion. This is, in part, enabled by Undertale's dedication to choice. RPGs, including modern Assassin's Creed games, usually try to give players chances to affect the outcome of the story. Most often, this is done by dialogue choices or quests with branching paths. And Assassin's Creed Valhalla does just this, and not much more. Undertale was built from the ground up with choice in mind, and from the very few beginning moments of the game, what you do will impact not only how the world responds to you, but what ending you're gonna see. The core success of any role-playing game lies in its ability to let players play the role of somebody else, and more importantly, somebody they choose to be. It's not about arbitrarily including a couple different ways to say yes and no in conversation, which is better known as the Fallout 4 effect, and is instead about player agency. Playing Undertale, you will laugh, you might cry, and you certainly are going to bob your head along with its soundtrack. But you're also going to choose how your adventure unfolds and eventually ends. What's more is that you can do all of this for $9.99. And while the average playthrough of Undertale is only around 6 hours, every playthrough is different, and you'll need to go through the game a few times to see even half of what's on offer. The third game you should buy instead of Assassin's Creed Valhalla is Cuphead, a seriously challenging 2D platformer and run-and-gunner inspired by 1930s-era cartoons and animation, which released in 2017 and today goes for $19.99, the most expensive game on my list. This brings my current total price tag for Hollow Knight, Undertale, and Cuphead to $44.99, $15 less than Assassin's Creed Valhalla. Cuphead may be the most expensive game on our list, but it was also the most painstakingly developed game on our list, as everything seen and heard on screen was created with the actual techniques of the 1930s and not just in the same style. This might not seem like a big deal on the front end, like if a band plays live in the studio or relies heavily on post-production effects, but the result is awe-inspiring, just like the former can be. Cuphead's presentation is an uncanny mirror image of 1930s cartoons as a video game, and as a video game with incredibly tight mechanics, slick movement, and heart-poundingly fast-paced action to boot. In the same way playing Assassin's Creed Unity was mind-blowing, seeing such an exquisitely wrought rendition of Paris filled with what was, for most, never-before-seen numbers of NPCs on screen at once, Cuphead is a marvel just to look at. In the lead-up to the 2007 launch of the Assassin's Creed franchise, Assassin's Creed wasn't just a next-generation showcase and visual delight. It was a slower, more tactical take on the third-person action game. Assassin's Creed continues to get more and more arcadey, with combat-focused abilities and skill trees overtaking stealth, and Cuphead takes this action focus to the extreme, in the sense that the mechanics and progression of Bloodborne can be distilled down into its boss encounters. Cuphead is a boss rush game. Every moment is spent hell-bent on surviving long enough to make it to the next boss, the next major milestone in progression. As a result, Cuphead is literally non-stop action. There's never a dull moment, and you won't even have enough time to stop and consider if you're bored, let alone actually be bored. Modern Assassin's Creed games have an identity crisis where they can't decide if they want to be stealth games or just outright action RPGs, while Cuphead doubles and then triples down on the idea of an action game without any extra frills or focus pullers to speak about, and will last the average player 10 hours before the main campaign ends, while a completionist can spend twice that time on the game easy. What's more is that games made with a lot of bespoke technology you don't see anywhere else, like Cuphead or L.A. Noire, need people to support them in ways other games don't, because it's not just a sequel that's at stake. What made the game so fresh and memorable could itself die out? The fourth game on my list that you should buy instead of Assassin's Creed Valhalla is Limbo, a strange, dark 2D puzzler platformer developed by Playdead, released in 2010 and today goes for $9.99. At my penultimate game here, this brings my digital shopping cart to a whopping $54.99, leaving only a few dollars left to spend. I'm not even going to try and argue some kind of vague philosophical connection between Limbo and Assassin's Creed Valhalla. Limbo and Assassin's Creed are nothing alike. Limbo, styled entirely in black and white, has the player guide an unnamed boy through a surreal world filled with dangerous puzzles that frequently kill the boy in cruel, sadistic ways. There are even very few sound effects, let alone an actual score. Many of the more hipster beard-having types consider Limbo to be one of the very few noir video games. So, what does this have to do with Assassin's Creed? It's simple, really. The existential criticism of all the Assassin's Creed games has been the same for a long time. They don't feel fresh. At some point in every Assassin's Creed game, you'll find yourself in a grindy, repetitive slog to get through something so you can do something else that's more fun. Limbo, and all of the Play Dead projects, are an ode to games without dead air, without fluff or any kind of filler content. And they do this while simultaneously being completely unlike anything else you've ever played before. In a very real sense, Limbo is the opposite of Assassin's Creed. And ironically, the opposite of Assassin's Creed is exactly what Assassin's Creed has needed for years. Not half-measured changes that appease some people at the expense of an equal amount of former fans. If Limbo sounds oppressive and weird and hard to get into, know that it's not precisely because it doesn't overstay its welcome, clocking in at a mere 2 hours long to complete and around 5 to 10 hours to fully complete. Limbo's brevity allows it to pack in constantly interesting and fresh takes on platforming puzzles you usually only find in colorful, upbeat games on a Nintendo platform. But instead, they're placed in a grisly, violent world that exists only in black and white. The only description Limbo is given on the Steam store page is, "Uncertain of his sister's fate, a boy enters Limbo." There are no lists of features or an explanation of what's going to go on in the game. It's just that single phrase floating lifelessly in the digital ether. And this pitifully short, weird, eerie phrase completely sums up Limbo as a game. If you've ever liked a horror movie or even a thriller and how those kinds of experiences can make you feel, you owe it to yourself to set aside a couple hours and play through Limbo. What's more is that this game that you will remember forever is a scant 1/6 the price of Assassin's Creed Valhalla. And for what it would cost you to get you and your significant other a coffee at Starbucks, you can have a truly mesmerizing video gaming experience. The fifth and final game on my list of releases you should pick up instead of Assassin's Creed Valhalla is Among Us. Chances are you just hopped off a game of Among Us anyways. But if you haven't, it's the latest craze that is sweeping the gaming world. It being a 2D RPG in the vein and style of a board game like Werewolf or Manhunter. On mobile, Among Us is a free download with cross-platform play. But if you'd like to scoop the full fat experience on Steam, that'll run you a cool $4.99. And calling this experience full fat is mostly a misnomer, considering on PC the game's locked to 30 FPS and it has what could be charitably called a bare-bones feature set. But ultimately these details don't matter when you're having a blast with your friends for the price of a cup of overpriced coffee. Including Among Us, this brings my total spent to $59.99, the price of the standard edition of Assassin's Creed Valhalla. And unlike any other game on this list, Among Us is the kind of game you can use as an icebreaker with friends and family and even, God forbid, non-gamers. It recently being streamed by major YouTubers alongside United States Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and United States House of Representatives member Ilhan Omar in one of the biggest Twitch streams ever. What is Among Us, you ask? Among Us is an RPG in the classic sense, where you yourself are role-playing. You and up to 9 others are attempting to prepare your spaceship for departure. But be careful, because there are 1 or 2 imposters among you who are hell-bent on sabotaging the ship and killing everyone. Crew members race to complete tasks and identify the imposters, while the imposters try to sabotage the ship, kill crew members, and slink away undetected. The meat of these kinds of games is in the role-playing, the moments where you have to argue that someone is or is not guilty, or lie to everyone to try and convince them that you aren't guilty yourself. This kind of true role-playing experience is precisely what the modern Assassin's Creed games have never lived up to, despite the obvious influence they take from The Witcher 3, a role-playing game without a role-playing problem. Lastly, as the Assassin's Creed games march towards the final form of Ubification, co-op, Among Us is precisely the right way to scratch this itch. You see, as the Assassin's Creed games become more arcadey and focused on laid-back, uber-powerful godmen smashing each other with heavy things, naturally they become more and more a fit for the Ubisoft style of co-op play. Like when you kick back in Far Cry and just shoot some dudes with a buddy. It's the natural endpoint of the Ubisoft style of open world. Big maps littered with objectives, characters, and events that aren't in and of themselves usually all that interesting, but when taken together, especially with a friend, add up to one big open sandbox to splash around in. Instead of trying to have those kinds of experiences in games and franchises that were never really meant to provide them, why not spend just a few dollars for a game that was built for exactly that and nothing else? At the finish line, if you can believe it, you can get all of these games on Steam in the US for the price of Assassin's Creed Valhalla's Standard Edition. Plus, Assassin's Creed Origins and Odyssey took gamers on average 30 to 40 hours to beat. And these games will take you, on average, 53 hours to beat. Do you think these games are a better value than Assassin's Creed Valhalla? Let me know in the comments down below. And for more videos like this one, make sure to subscribe to us here at The Gamer and ring the notification bell to stay up to date on all our latest videos. Thanks for watching.